Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome today. I'm speaking with Deborah Rutherford. Deborah loves Jesus, being a wife to Don, singing old hymns, and nature walks. She is an author, poet, podcaster, and an award-winning makeup artist who has swapped her brushes for a pen. She is the founder of the Behold Her Beauty podcast and blog, where she enjoys cheering others on. Her books include Unexpected Blessings, 40 Days of Discovering God's Best, Prodigal Daughter, Poems of Light for the Lost Ones, and she's currently working on a beauty and faith book represented by the Blythe Daniel Agency. And I think I just saw the other day, did somebody sign a contract?
I did with the Wayback Books for my poetry book, Prodigal Daughter,
Okay,
Poems of
awesome.
Light for the Lost.
Okay, well, welcome, Deborah, and we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, everybody, I'm not really sure whether we're having technological difficulties or not, but if the sound sounds just a little bit different, we're doing everything we can to still make this conversation happen. So just bear with us and lean in. And, over here, I do things a little differently. I love to start in the beginning, to look at someone's childhood and work our way up to what is going on now. And, I'm the biggest cheerleader there is. If you have something you want me to share, I'm happy to share it. I want everyone to be running their race well for the kingdom. But what I've found is that when I start at the beginning and make my way up to what someone's doing now, God is just so wonderfully displayed. His character is faithful and true in every single story, no matter how different they all are. And so it's become just such an encouragement for me to be able to hear these stories, connect with these wonderful people, and see the goodness of God in every story, no matter how difficult, no matter what shameful or sharp places we have to look at. God comes in and he restores those places. He recreates and redeems them somehow, making them good. He allows us to connect to others who are going through difficult times in the places that he never wanted for us. And, unfortunately, he made everything good, but creation fell, and so he still works goodness, though. He can't be anything but good. So he still works goodness for his children who love him. And we are able to then tell the stories to give him glory and connect to others and love him and love them. And those are the two greatest commandments. So that's what we're here for. I'm very excited to have Deborah with me today. She was on my launch team for my latest book, and we started following each other on social media and just really connected. And we've had so many conversations now back and forth between my being on her podcast and now her coming on mine, that I feel like I've known her forever, and I can't wait to share her with you. So knowing that we start in childhood, Deborah, would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure. To my childhood, it was up till I was 7 years old. We lived in Eagle Rock, California, and we lived near the canyon and then in the canyon, and all my cousins lived nearby, and we had dance lessons and gymnastics and painting lessons, and the neighborhood would gather together and have slumber parties, and um, it was just really kind of a time in my life. And the reason why it really sticks out is because then we moved out into the suburbs, and that's when my father's alcoholism started kicking in. So it's kind of these really two stark differences.
Mm-hmm.
And so on one hand, it was really just, a childhood of where I feel I guess a curious, wide-eyed, excited child, but at the same time starting to see things that maybe a child shouldn't see yet.
Yeah, you had told me in our pre-recording call that you felt there was this pressure to excel when it came to your father because of his situation in the past. Like he had hurt his back and he couldn't fly anymore. That's what he had done. And so when they gave him medicine, that's when he began to use alcohol. And I don't think anybody ever wants to end up in addiction, and no family wants to endure that. I unfortunately had that in our family as well. I'm so sorry that that was, something that happened when you were young. You told me about a really difficult memory that you had in addition during that time when you were younger that you had never told anyone about, but you carried the memory with you, even though you didn't have an actual face to the memory. And we have to be careful here. This is, we're sharing a Christian show, but in general, if you could just tell us a little bit about what had happened at that time.
Well, during the what I would call the idyllic childhood, actually really wasn't because there was I guess what we call a stolen childhood at that moment at that time.
Hmm.
And we had a relative who came to babysit us. He's no longer alive, and so I don't mind talking about it all. But even if he were, I would talk about it. But I didn't know it was him at the time. And then
Hmm.
years later, we'll get down to the store. I would go work for the same person who would then always attempt to touch me, and at that time, and then into the future, putting all of it together with my sister, who it had happened with too, and with another cousin, who we would all go work for this man. It was we brought it to my mother, who said that he babysitted us when they had gone to a funeral. He had stayed there, and my sister had the same exact memory of her being touched too. So it was something that I this kind of haunting memory that I always carried. It didn't have a face; it was just hands.
Hmm.
It was like in a dark closet, and it was just kind of this disturbing, kind of haunting memory. But I found myself very young. Like I remember my friend Christy, who lived at the bottom of the canyon,
Hmm.
was at home one day, and I just became so angry as I went into her backyard, and I took I think one of her dolls, maybe more, and I went. We had this like kind of old tennis court that nobody really used anymore, except we put on maybe neighborhood talent shows in there or that sort of thing. And I remember going behind it in kind of the high brush and then destroying the doll. And then
Wow.
also just kind of destroying her backyard. And then I blamed it on my brother, my little brother. And he got in trouble for it. And so I was just, so those two memories I kind of carried along going, where did that all come from?
Yeah, one of the things with anger that's interesting that I've noticed is that when we're angry, a lot of times we act out with the person that we trust most to still love us. And so it's interesting that that was a person that you kind of acted out towards was this friend of yours. And there was so much anger in you, I'm sure, after experiencing all of these difficult, traumatic things. And when we don't share, we don't really tell anyone about them, and we don't know how to articulate it, it's like a trash compactor. It just keeps getting pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. And so it's not in any way unordinary for you to have had an outburst and for you to have maybe done it with a friend.
Yeah, yes, and I understand that now, but it's taken
Yeah.
so many years to understand that because, like you said, it's not something that I told anybody about or talked about. It was just, and but it still you affects you.
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, I had similar things I didn't share, and I made all kinds of decisions to not feel the feelings because the feelings don't leave, and they're in your emotions, they're in your body. And then you had this atmosphere of your father's alcoholism beginning to escalate at the same time. It's just a lot for you to handle. We were talking about like during school. Did that feel like a getaway for you when you were in school, not being in the home environment?
Yeah, school was that for me. I was probably in every single after school activity there could be. At one point, I would be in theater. I would be a cheerleader. I would be the Spanish club president. I would be the ski club. I was just every club, every activity. Thank goodness I had lovely friends. It was from elementary school up to, I mean, even back in, I'm talking more now when we've moved out to the suburbs. But even when we lived before in the canyon, we had our neighborhood friends. Plus, at that time in my life, all the cousins were really, we would always be together. My dad had a very large family. I think it was 7 brothers and sisters, and so tons of cousins. So that was always nice. But now that we're out in the suburb, I had the blessing of just wonderful childhood friends, and many of them are still my friends today.
Oh,
It was just a way, like I got to see a lot of their families that didn't have the same dynamics as my family.
hmm.
And then some did, some did in a sense, and so we could kind of bond and relate and feel just accepted and loved by each other. So I feel really grateful for that.
Yeah, and you also had discovered poetry in school in eighth grade. You said you had your first kind of creative writing class. You learned about poetry, and I would imagine that that was a great creative release valve for you, carrying all of this pent up emotion. And a little bit later, you told me that three amazing things happened. When you were 16, your dad quit drinking. It was really huge to see that you can stop something that's bad or difficult. He started going to church every day, and he would go to the local coffee shop, and anyone who wanted to talk to him, he would talk with them. I think those are some amazing things. Like, well, what was that time like for you?
That was, seeing that was really hopeful and something I could carry with me in my life when I would go through various addictive habits. And I'm talking about like from an eating disorder to drug use to drinking too much to, that sort of thing. Or just eating, even, I mean, eating was a big one for me, but I'm talking about after the eating disorder, like this, where you kind of manage eating. And so but it always showed me that you can, come through something like that. But at the same time, at least when it was happening, now we're talking about the 1970s, there wasn't really any care for the family. So although my dad came back well,
Mhm.
we weren't. I wasn't. I wasn't
Yeah.
well. But we were expected to be well, right? Because you have to be well for him. Plus, when we were talking about the perfection thing earlier, it was more of like, I'm not sure if it was just our family. I'm not sure if it was because that was my Mexican Catholic side of the family, but there was this pressure that not to share the family secrets with the other families because everybody was supposed to be putting kind of on a facade that their family was better than the other one. Nothing was wrong with them. And I don't know if that was said or demonstrated. So I felt like kind of that element in there. But also during my father's alcoholism, and even afterward, he did have anger issues that I don't think he ever fully recovered, healed from those. He would still have outbursts that I would hear about, not towards me. I never really saw it, but towards other family members would tell me about it. But I think there was this fear if I wasn't the good girl that his anger might be directed to me as it was to my other family members.
Well, often people, even when they stop drinking or stop using, if they haven't dealt with the emotional issues, the root issues, and they're what we call a dry drunk, and they still have the anger. I'm sorry that was something that was part of your environment, and that it made you feel like, you had to be maybe walking on eggshells and be careful. I'm glad that it didn't directly happen to you, but it sounds like it still really affected you.
Oh, of course, yeah, because I mean, as I before saw a lot of just, well, not after the drinking, but during the drinking, a lot of just violence, and towards my mother, towards my siblings, and I became, I guess, kind of the peacemaker, like the child that would calm
Yeah.
them down, and it was a horrible place to be put in. Really, it kind of, I think, became sort of made me very angry at my mother, and
Yeah.
it kind of really, I think, put a strain on our relationship, you know.
hmm I'm sure it did. And here's the thing, you're still a kid. Your
Yeah,
brain isn't even fully formed yet. You've had all of this trauma, and now you're being put in a role that's not a role a person's supposed to have, peacemaker.
yeah. And then so the poetry in the I took the creative writing class, and Mrs. Brown was our teacher, and she just it opened up this world for me. I always loved to read and watch movies and listen to musical soundtracks, and I it was just an extension, well, a way for me to, I guess, process the feelings I was having, but also I would write poems and cries and kind of prayers to Jesus. And
Mhm.
because I really felt that I was like, I look at some of my writing from that period, and I just see this young girl that just didn't understand why she was going on. But I was sort of, in a sense, blaming myself for feeling so dirty, shamed, felt
Yeah.
like I wasn't a good.
hmm
And it was just, and now I know as an adult where all that came from. But at that time, it was a difficult thing. But I do believe that God gave me that as a gift that would tether me to Him during my turbulent kind of prodigal wandering years when I would purposely leave the church.
Yeah. Yeah, you had told me you stopped going to church. You were trying to be what you called a strong woman. And during those prodigal years, and we all have them, you became a little more promiscuous. You kind of were feeling, I think, your way through like, what are my boundaries and my limits, and what is it that makes me feel happy? You ended up having this one time you got a role in a play, and a friend of yours got invited to France. And so you ended up lying to the theater and saying that you had mono so you could go to France. And that to me sounds like the ultimate, like you just wanted like adventure. You wanted something that was so much bigger than the feelings you were feeling. And I can absolutely see somebody was carrying everything that you were carrying, doing something like that. You told me you got into punk rock a little bit and did a little bit of partying and not showing up for classes. Um, yeah, and so during that time, I can understand that you did that. So you told me this one time where you had a cousin who had gone to Vancouver. They had gotten supposedly a boat and sailed to Guam and met someone, got married, and you thought like, that's what I want to do. And honestly, that's not what worked out. You actually tried to do it. I'm gonna consolidate some things so we can get to some of the good stuff you're doing now. But I can see, why you would have some of these thoughts. They really were this inner desire for you to just escape some of the reality of some of this heaviness that you had and didn't really understand why. You told me that you really didn't know what love was, and you were living with your boyfriend at the time. You were working at a bakery. You ended up getting pregnant, and don't even remember thinking about wanting to have a baby at the time. You ended up flying to LA. You want to tell us a little bit about that time?
Yeah, and again, with a lot of my traumatic memories, I don't remember much about them. And so one of my friends had an abortion, and it seemed like the easy thing to do. It seemed like like my generation was hit really hard with the Roe versus Wade and the whole propaganda that that's just some cells. It's not a baby yet. You don't have to worry about it. And it seemed really convenient. I wouldn't have to tell my parents. Um, I wouldn't have to think about it. I was buying kind of into the lie of the career woman
Mm.
and didn't see the value of motherhood at that time. And so I did. And it was, had I known that it wasn't that it was a life and that it would be something eternal,
Yeah.
you know, that is something that I didn't know at the time. And I think that part of it is maybe I thought I didn't deserve that kind of life
Mm.
either, just
Mhm.
because of everything that had happened to me so far. I was just kind of living, I think, an escapism kind of life. And when I turned away from God at 16, when we do that, it's so dangerous because then, our hearts grow cold and we can't hear him anymore because we're not listening to him. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's right there, but we have. And of course he's the good father. He knows and it hurts him that we're going to go down these paths, but he allows us to. And but now looking back, I see that he was with me nonstop through everything that I went through. And the wonderful, beautiful thing that he has given me is because for many years I thought that what I did was really okay. I was very righteous about it. I was very pro-choice. I performed on concerts for pro-choice events and actually did a poetry album for a pro-choice event. And I, 30 years later, after coming back to Christ and reading Dr. Charles Stanley's Christian Handbook, the Holy Spirit revealed to me what my abortions, and I had two of them, were.
Mhm.
And, it was taking the life of my child, and it was horrifying. It was just the most horrifying moment I've ever experienced in my whole life. And I just felt so broken. I felt like, hey, how could God love me?
Mm. Mm. I'm so,
And but he met me right there. Jesus was with me.
yeah.
And I felt his presence. I felt him holding me, loving me, telling me that I was forgiven, um, but that he, and that my babies were with him. And I actually he gave me kind of a vision of them so that whenever I start feeling, missing them or feeling like, why did I do that? Or, that those feelings that come up later on in life, because it's not something that, like, I know I'm forgiven by him. And right now, actually, I'm going through an abortion recovery class, which was a divine appointment, which I started in. Actually, tomorrow is our memorial for our babies, and it was, but it's his daily grace that he gives us every day for me it's that. For somebody else it might be something else. It might be abandonment, it might be um, job loss, it might be financial, it might whatever it is. We are forgiven, we're going through our healing, but there are times when it comes back to us and we start feeling like it may overtake us, or but then Jesus meets us right there with his daily grace. And it's a very, very beautiful thing to
Yeah.
receive and have.
It is. I'm reminded of one of my favorite scriptures as you're speaking, which is found in Hosea 2:15, which is I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. And I'm a digger. I looked up and went, why is it called the Valley of Achor? What is it? So your valley is one of the lowest places, and Achor means trouble. It was called Achor because Achan and his family were actually killed in that valley for disobeying and being rebellious against a direct commandment of God. And what God is saying is, even in your lowest valley of trouble, brought on by repercussions of your own actions, I will meet you with the door of hope, and that door is Jesus.
Yes, yes, and it is, and I think that's just, you know, what all of this is for me is this opportunity to let people see that this can happen for them too. This is real, like Jesus is real,
Yeah.
and he will meet you in this, and he will carry your burden for you, and he'll give you daily grace. And what I think is so wonderfully planned by God is that he protects us from ourselves. Like, although maybe I took life in the earth, they still live.
That's right.
And it's so beautiful that I, and that's why I have such a hard time with the whole thing, because it's not a choice, and you can't kill a life because the soul is eternal. And so I think that if we all as human beings understood that, there would be less of that in our world.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Life is eternal, and your unborn children didn't have a chance to ever sin, and so they are immediately with Christ. There's this beauty in the fact that God remembers that we don't know what we don't know. Um,
Mm,
and he also reminds us, one of my other favorite things to read in the Bible is that we're made of dust. Like he remembers, and he made provision through Jesus to take what had happened in our hearts, the wicked twistedness, the not knowing, the not understanding, the rebellion, and to give us a way back into the family. I mean, one of my favorite moments to remember is when Christ met me, which was that is why Christ came. God knew we, couldn't do it on our own, but he loved us enough that he wanted to bring us back home. He wanted to bring us back into the family. And I often think about the fact, and it's dropping in my mind again, about how, Satan and the angels, they all fell from heaven, they all fell away, and they were not made in God's image. They were not family. They were not made to be part of his family. And so he did not send Jesus to bring them home. He sent Jesus to bring us home. In light of time, we need to kind of consolidate another little section here. But, at one point in time, you and your husband were working in the music industry, but you eventually um, do some corporal tunnel and other issues. You eventually ended up switching industries, and you were encouraged to be a makeup artist. Was this opportunity where you were in makeup school, but you got like a major role? You were on The Grinch That Stole Christmas. So you got one of the major actors. And there's a lot of rejection in that industry, but this was a moment when y'all had gotten married. There was a writer's strike happening. You guys ended up going into a little bit of debt. Like, can you tell us about that time?
um, let's see. Well, ended up transferring into the makeup industry because my husband knew about being makeup artist, and I had an opportunity to go to makeup school. And it was just one of those industries that I suppose it was timing, but it was just welcomed us for a while. It welcomed us for a while. But I always just look back now and I'd say, in exchange, though, in exchange for your sleep, in exchange for your maybe in a sense your soul.
Mhm.
Because if you want to excel in that industry, maybe other ones, I did that one for 30 years, so that's the one I'm most familiar with. there's a lot of, at least for me, I became very ambitious, very striving, very jealous, and I did get ahead. I did get a gold statues. I did get to wear gowns to award shows and things like that. And I think it's Napoleon who said, "Give man shiny things, shiny little awards, and they'll do anything." And that's sort of like really feel that way about that industry. Just to get some kind of award, people will just stab each other in the back.
Mm.
And really, the award means nothing. It's sort of like, I guess it's like an idol in a sense. So I keep mine on the bottom shelf. I wanted to throw them out, but my husband said no. You keep them on the bottom shelf so that we don't make them anything more than they are, right? Because it's okay to have something to show that you did a good job at something. That's one thing, right? But to have something be anything more than that, we have to be careful of. And then we came back to, we were about halfway into that career, and then Christ brought us back home to Him. We were both prodigals, so we came home to Christ, and that was through my husband too, who brought the Bible back into the house, and it was amazing. And at the same time, our whole life just changed because now we're like, oh my goodness, we with new eyes, we just kind of saw what the industry we were in for what it really was, and then also I saw how it really affected me. I would be fine when I wasn't at work. And then when I would go back into it, as Apostle Paul says, I would put back on old clothes sometimes, old habits, old ambitions. And by the time we got to our very last film, which was about a year ago, I felt I had finally passed the test where I didn't do that. And I did had a lot of leaning on Jesus, though, he had to show me that even when I was on a film stage. Even when I was working with actors, Jesus was my shepherd, not them, Jesus. And I could be in his green pastures even while I was there. And that was huge for me. That was like, okay, I'm starting to get this. And so it's been just a relief for us to leave the film industry just because it was so competitive, and we went through a lot of heartache, especially we moved from Los Angeles to Georgia, and we suffered career assassinations. People we thought were our friends just weren't. They wanted a job more than they wanted friendship, and it was just and I had been praying, we both had been praying like when God was going to move us on from the industry. And so he did. And so now we're kind of in a building stage. I'm doing my books, and my husband's doing his music and an online business. And so we're just kind of really praying and seeing what God has for us next.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love how God does kind of open and close doors and do different things to help us get onto the right track. He always gives us choice, though. And, it's up to us when we come into agreement with the calling he has on our lives. Now, you and I had talked about, again, I have to consolidate just a little bit here, but we have a friend, a mutual friend, Sarah Gary, who you had started. You had met her, I think, on Compel, and you had started to intern for her. And over time in being with her, she suggested that you get on social media, and you were already stuck at home. I think it was the pandemic at that time, like so many of us. And it was a place where you could connect with people. That's when you started podcasting and began to kind of figure out the writing journey. Can you tell us, you did a collaborative book, poetry devotional during that time. Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, I had been on social media for a second, and then I got off. That just wasn't my generation at that time. And then during the pandemic, one of my friends gave me the book by Lisa Tereska, Unglued, which led me to Compel Pro training. And I started that, and I still wasn't on social media, so I would just be and get their emails, and also Proverbs ministries, Proverbs 31 Ministries, their writers, and Sarah Ganger was one of their writers, and I really loved her writing, so I would get her newsletter. And then she was looking for an intern, and I just thought, am I? And at this time now, the pandemic stopped. Well, at least we were going back to work, and I thought, am I crazy? I'm a 62-year-old professional woman taking an internship, but I felt God really press on me that if I wanted to learn what it would take and meant to be a Christian author, this was my opportunity. And what I learned most is how hard I would have to work.
Mm,
It's and this Sarah works very hard and also working hard, but at the same time leaning on and depending on God for everything. Like it's all for His glory, not for our glory. And it was so there were really important faith lessons to learn with being a writer, so that when you face rejection or even when you face praise, you're not led astray, right? Um, and then that led to in the Compel group, there were five of us who started meeting on Facebook chat but we had all been on Teresa Miller's beta reading for her book, a book that she put out, The Posture of Victory, and we were meeting on Facebook, and then we're showing up for each other. Like if somebody had a tech question or wanted to know about an email list, and then one day we decided, why don't we make this a mastermind group and meet once a month on Zoom? And then we felt like we started doing that, and then we felt like God wanted us to put out a resource together, and that became the book Unexpected Blessings: 40 Days of Discovering God's Best. And right now we are writing the second volume, which will come out in February. And so it's just a wonderful collaboration. And at the same time, I've been praying for, I got this from another writer. I'm not sure who it was right off, but about praying for your team, for God to bring you the team for your projects. Now, I happen to have different projects. Some people have one. I don't know why I have different areas that God has given me. But so one is the devotional, and He brought me my team. Then I was praying for a team for my poetry book, and He brought me Kimberly Finney with The Way Back to Ourselves and the Way Back books. And so she and I have been working over the last year on, like, I'm writing the book, but she's my creative editor, so working very close with me on the poems. And I wanted to work with her, and I felt God wanted me to, but because she's loves God, she's also a counselor, and so some of the things in the book, it's part memoir, devotional. I'm going into some of these things we're talking about, and I really needed a counselor there with me during it, right? So it was
yeah.
perfect. And because I need to heal any things that still need to be healed before I could share them with other people to
Yep.
help them. And plus, she's a professor in English and a poet herself. So I figured it was the perfect combination to help me realize this book. And then I've been praying for my Beauty and Faith book, which I had resisted for a while because part of me just wanted to run from the makeup industry, film world as fast as I could and never look back, right? But God uses everything in our lives for His good, right? And that wasn't His plan. He wanted me to take the good things from that and through His lens to give back to women, especially young women, who how they look, their appearance, their beauty can can be a stumbling block for them and possibly turn them from Him. And so it's actually just one of there are so many areas that can do that when we know our identities in Christ, but when we're becoming a young woman, and especially if you had things that have happened to me, you can very be tricked by the world, right? And beauty is one of those areas, or how we look. And so God brought me a wonderful agent to work with for that project, Blythe Daniel, and she actually is the one about 3 years ago who gave me the book concept. And so it just took me a long time to figure it out. I had to start my podcast and my blog, The Beholder Beauty, because I need to know, what does it mean? What does God care about? What does beauty and faith intersect? What does all that mean? And so it's been a really wonderful journey and adventure.
Yeah, and as somebody who's always working on six projects at once, I completely understand. I think what happens is when God sees that we are obedient with what he asks us to do, especially when it's hard or we don't know what to do, but we know we're hearing him, he gives us new things to do. He's a God who's always doing a new thing. And it's so cool. He doesn't need us to join him in his work, but he wants us to. And so it's just this wonderful kind of dance that we get to do with him while we're on this side of heaven. And honestly, I think it's important for us to know what God says beauty really is. I remember when I came on your podcast, you asked me a question about like what was my favorite beauty tip or to share, and my answer was like spending time with Jesus and a smile. Like it wasn't makeup, it wasn't like clothing, it wasn't like for me. That is the most beautiful thing about me is that I'm able to like be kind to people and loving to people and then share the goodness that I've gotten and overflow that. And I think God's talked so much about our heart and what's beautiful and that we need to guard that. So I can't wait to see when this comes out. I'm sure it'll be perfectly in his timing. And we're going to have in the show notes, everybody waits for you to go ahead and follow Deborah and all she's doing. We talked about doing a giveaway of the poetry book you were just telling us about, The Unexpected Blessings, the week that your podcast episode airs. And I have one more question for you. I could get a cup of coffee and talk to you for a couple of hours if we had the time. But I always end with this question, not that we can go back and change anything, but I believe that, the wisdom from your answer, someone listening could apply to their life today. So if you could go back and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Hmm. Wait, I made a note. Let's see. I think the most important thing is when, especially as a young girl, when you're struggling and you feel like you can't tell anybody about what's going on. And it can be about, the struggle could be from boys, the struggle could be from just you're feeling like your body's all of a sudden changing. Maybe there's conflict at home. Maybe it's in school. Maybe you're being bullied or teased or taunted. But I think when you have these struggles, the most important thing is that there is one person that you can go to, and it's Jesus. You can go to him. And it's
Mhm.
very important that we all know that, even as adults, that he will meet us, he will listen to us, and he, he will comfort us and give us peace, but he will also give us direction. So that is my thing, is that if you can just remember, if like my younger self, if I could have just remembered that I could still have kept going to him and
Yeah.
not think that I had to go another way to find what I needed in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's amazing advice. And it's bringing to mind something from my reading part of my Bible time yesterday. And I think I even made a video about it because it struck me. I read the Bible every day. I study it, I teach it, and I've read it through maybe 21 or 22 times. I definitely know the word, but you know how God will reveal different things at different times to you. And I was reading in Joshua chapters 22 and 23, and there was this bookend word right around something really cool in the center, and it was cling, right? So in 22 it says to cling to God, and then it says it again
Mm.
in 23. And so I looked up what did cling mean in that context? And it was likened to when a husband and wife are become one. It was likened to when a child is able to depend on a parent in a difficult situation. It was likened to choosing. It was more than emotion. It was this actual choice, right? To put him first and to trust him completely. And it stuck out to me each time, and I just wanna share that, like, you need to cling to God. There is not a darn thing that will ever happen in this world that if you cling to Him and you choose Him and you are one with Him, that you cannot get through.
Absolutely. That is it right there. It just cling to him, and life will because life will always change.
Mhm.
There will be ebb and flow, good times, bad times. There'll be so many different things, but Jesus will always be the same. He will always
Yeah.
be there. And it's our one anchor that will get us through this life.
Yeah, yeah, I loved how it talked about it being like husband and wife because we are the bride of Christ, right? And so
Hmm.
Um, I think sometimes it's so easy to look at the wind and the waves, and I just think it was such a great place to stop, to remind people of that. So thank you for that. And I am grateful that I've been able to have you come on and share your story. I'm sure you and I will continue to collaborate and be in contact. I love following you, and I can't wait to see about the new book and all of the good things coming. Um, and we will definitely do the giveaway when this releases. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to share your story.
Thank you so much for having me come on to share my story. And I know you feel this way because you're one of my sisters in Christ writers that I've seen share the difficult parts of her story with, pointing to God and His glory and what Jesus can do. And in a sense, it's I don't want to say proof, but it's like in a sense, it's like, yes, he is faithful. He is real. You can believe in him because look what he's done here, and he can do it for you too. And so your story and your ministry and your writing has given me more at ease at telling mine.
Oh, well, that's a wonderful thing to hear.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, no, because it's like we want to obey God when He says, "Okay, do this," but sometimes it's a little like, "Oh, really? You really want me to do that?"
Yeah, it can be difficult, but I've learned to obey because every
Mm-hmm.
time it's worked out. And it's so wonderful to have community like this where you have somebody else that knows what it feels like, where you can reach out and say, like, hey, I could use some prayer right now. I'm having a lot of trouble on this chapter, and we're
Yeah.
there for each other because not everyone understands what that kind of vulnerability is like. It's a little different it's always vulnerability is vulnerability, but it's a little different to put things on a page and put them out there in this world where everyone has an opinion versus, maybe talking in a small group in person with people. And so um it can be a little harrowing and a little nerve-wracking, but when we truly trust that that's what God's asked us to share and that there's a person out there, and that's why we do it, right? Even if there's just one person out there who can read our words and say, oh, you mean I'm not alone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And give them um that hope that
Yeah.
they're not alone, and that there is
There's a savior.
there's a savior, and
Yeah,
just don't have to live the way
yeah,
you're living. You can just accept him right now.
yeah, and that he loves you. If
Yeah.
nothing else, just know that he loves you. Well, again, we probably should have a cup of coffee. We could keep going, but, I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you for having me on. It was wonderful.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.